The tropical rainforest stretched out forever under the pale moonlight. It should have been peaceful, but the roar of fighter jets and the thunder of heavy artillery shattered the sky. I lay flat in the thick grass, heart hammering against my ribs as bullets whistled inches above my head. The battlefield in front of me was a nightmare of twisted bodies and blood. It was enough to make any man freeze in terror. A young man lay next to me, his clothes soaked crimson. He looked back at the hundreds of mercenaries closing in on our position and gritted his teeth against the pain. "Brother E," he gasped, every word a struggle. "They're almost here. You guys get out of here. I'll stay behind and hold them off." "Bullshit," I barked, my voice raw. "I'm not leaving you behind. I don't leave brothers behind. Ever." I didn't wait for his reply. I lunged from the grass, moving so fast I practically vanished. I tore into the mercenary line like a whirlwind. Blood sprayed, limbs flew, and the urge to kill took over completely. In that moment, I wasn't a man anymore. I was a god of slaughter, cold and heartless, harvesting lives with every movement. Behind me, the rest of my wounded brothers followed my lead. They were battered and bleeding, but they fought like cornered beasts. Then, the rhythmic chatter of machine guns cut through the air. I watched in horror as my men started falling. "Thunder Dragon! Leopard!" I screamed. The sight sent me into a blind rage, but before I could reach them, a massive explosion erupted right beside me. The shockwave tossed me through the air like a rag doll. I slammed into the dirt, the world spinning. "Brother E!" The young man screamed my name. He fought like a demon, hacking through the mercenaries to reach my side. I struggled to sit up, clutching my chest as I coughed up blood. The blast had done serious internal damage. "Brother E, move. If we don't leave now, we're dead," he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. I looked around blankly. My brothers, the elite members of the Killing God organization, were dropping one by one. A sharp, stabbing pain twisted in my heart. These weren't just soldiers. They were my family. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. A low, cold voice drifted from across the field. Suddenly, a fresh wave of enemies swarmed toward us. Hundreds of them, a sea of black uniforms. "Go. I'll cover you," the young man shouted. His face was set with a final, grim determination. Before I could stop him, he charged headlong into the enemy ranks. Bloodwolf. I reached out, but I was too slow. He moved like lightning, cutting down enemies even as he took hits. But no matter how fast he was, he couldn't outrun Lead. Bullets tore into his chest and shoulders. He stumbled, blood staining his shirt a deep, dark red, but he turned back to me and flashed one last, bloody smile. "Sir, please wake up." The voice came out of nowhere, pulling me violently from the nightmare. I jerked awake, drenched in a cold sweat. My hand instinctively flew to my waist to draw a dagger that wasn't there. I was ready to kill, but instead of a mercenary, I found myself looking into a pair of beautiful, worried eyes. "Sir, are you okay? You seem to be having a nightmare," she said softly. I stared at her, my mind a fog of war and confusion. Where am I?" She blinked, looking a bit surprised. "You're on an international flight to Nance City, sir." I looked around the cabin. The other passengers were staring at me like I was a ghost. I took a deep breath, trying to slow my racing heart. "I'm sorry," I muttered to the people around me, forcing a weak smile. "I didn't mean to disturb you." My gaze drifted back to the woman. She was a flight attendant, her uniform hugging a perfect figure. She had a stunning face and long, slender legs wrapped in black stockings. She was, by all accounts, flawless. "If you need anything, just call me," she said with a relieved smile before heading back toward the cockpit. I rubbed my temples, trying to shake the images of the dream. They wouldn't leave. I grew up an orphan, raised by a master who lived as a hermit. He taught me Taoism and martial arts in total isolation until I was 16. Then, he sent me abroad. He probably didn't expect that his pupil would become a legend in the underworld. In just a few years, I became the world's top assassin, the Killing God. I built my own organization. To my enemies, I was a taboo, a name whispered in fear. But 2 months ago, a mission went sideways. We took heavy losses. Bloodwolf, my closest brother, died in that jungle. I wiped out every single enemy in revenge, but it didn't bring him back. The guilt and the blood finally broke me. I was tired of the killing. A few days ago, I left the organization without a word and boarded a plane back to China. Nan City was a massive coastal hub, the financial heart of the country. As I looked out the window at the sprawling skyline, I felt a surge of genuine emotion. It had been 9 years. The city had changed. Soaring skyscrapers and complex highways now formed its skeleton, but it still felt like home. The plane touched down smoothly. When the doors opened and I stepped out, I took a long, deep breath. The air didn't smell like gunpowder or rot. It smelled like peace. Suddenly, my brow furrowed. A familiar chill crawled up my spine, a sense of imminent threat. I caught myself and let out a bitter inward laugh. I'd spent too long in war zones. My instincts were jumpy, seeing shadows where there were none. I shook it off and headed toward security. But as I passed through the metal detector, a loud alarm blared. Within seconds, the peaceful terminal was swarming with armed police. They moved with precision, circling me instantly. A dozen gun barrels pointed straight at my head. "Don't move. Hands behind your head. Get down." My face darkened. My fists clenched, the knuckles popping like firecrackers. A wave of killing intent rose in my chest, but I forced it down. This wasn't the jungle. This was China. I slowly knelt and put my hands behind my head, my eyes scanning the room, instinctively plotting an escape route just in case. Then, the crowd of officers parted. A female police officer walked toward me, her eyes cold and sharp as ice. "We suspect you are a terrorist," the female officer said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You're coming with us to the station." Her name was Chu Xiangxiang. She stared at me with cold, unforgiving eyes. Earlier that day, the Nan City police had received a tip from Interpol. A high-profile terrorist was supposedly flying into the city carrying explosives. They had the entire airport locked down before I even landed. When I stepped through that metal detector and the alarm screamed, I became their prime suspect. To them, I wasn't a returning traveler. I was a walking bomb. The terminal erupted into chaos. Most people scrambled away, desperate to escape the potential blast zone. A few idiots stayed behind, driven by a morbid curiosity to see a real-life terrorist. I stared back at her, my eyes wide. Chu Xiangxiang didn't blink. She signaled to the officers flanking her. They lowered their rifles and stepped forward. One of them pulled out a pair of cold, steel handcuffs. I didn't resist. I let them click the metal onto my wrists. I hadn't come back to China to start a war or finish a mission. I came here to retire. Besides, I knew I wasn't carrying anything dangerous. A short while later, I was sitting in an interrogation room at the Nan City Police Headquarters. Name: Zhang Yi. Age: 25. Gender: Chu Xiangxiang paused, pen hovering over the paper. "Beautiful officer, can't you tell my gender just by looking?" I leaned back, adopting a lazy, carefree smirk. I hadn't really looked at her at the airport, but now that we were alone, I took her in. She was tall, at least 5'7". Her police uniform was tight, hugging curves that could make a man forget his own name. I didn't even try to hide the fact that I was checking her out. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. Her eyes flared with sudden rage. "Wipe that grin off your face and stay focused, or I'll give you something to really smile about." I chuckled but stayed quiet. "Take off your shirt," she commanded, standing up abruptly. Her eyes locked onto mine. "Whoa," I said, putting on my best act of a terrified innocent. "What are you planning to do to me?" She looked like she wanted to laugh at my expression, but she caught herself. She glared instead. "Stop playing games. I suspect you're hiding dangerous materials, maybe even a suicide vest. Take it off. Now." "I'm a law-abiding citizen," I said with a grin. "I don't carry bombs. Are you going to take it off, or do I have to force you?" Her face turned icy. She reached for the pistol at her hip. Okay, I'll take it off." I held up my hands, giving her a pathetic, helpless smile. "But I'm handcuffed. Unless you want to help me undress." I let a wicked little smirk play on my lips. "In your dreams," she hissed. She stepped forward and unlocked the cuffs, her voice dropping to a warning growl. "Don't try anything. This is a police station." "I'm not as stupid as I look," I muttered, rolling my eyes. I reached up and pulled the shirt over my head. Chu Xiangxiang opened her mouth to snap at me again, but the words died in her throat. She froze. Her face went from angry red to a pale, stunned mask of shock. Her eyes were glued to my chest. I wasn't just fit. I had the physique of a man carved from granite. But it wasn't the muscles that shocked her. It was the map of my life written in scars. Jagged lines from knives, puckered craters from high-velocity rounds. My torso was a graveyard of near misses. What? What happened to you? She whispered. How do you have so many scars? Seen enough. I asked, my voice flat. Since I'm not carrying a bomb, can I go now? I pulled my shirt back on. It took her a few seconds to snap out of her daze. She shook her head, trying to regain her professional coldness. No, not yet. Are you kidding me? I felt a flash of genuine irritation. Why not? A man with this many scars isn't a good person, she said, her iron justice persona returning. We need to verify your identity before you're cleared. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. I spent 2 years serving in the military overseas. You get scars in the service. Is that so hard to believe? You were a soldier? Her eyes widened again. Check the files, I said, sitting back down and looking at her with pure exhaustion. You'll see. She hesitated, then turned and walked out of the room. I sat there, perfectly calm. Before I had boarded that plane, I'd made sure my records were scrubbed and rewritten. 5 minutes later, she walked back in. Her entire demeanor had shifted. The security machine at the airport was malfunctioning, she said softly. Your identity checks out. You're free to go. She looked at me differently now. There was a flicker of respect, maybe even admiration, in her eyes. She'd always looked up to soldiers, even if I hadn't served in the Chinese military. To her, a soldier was a soldier. I didn't wait around. I stood up, eager to leave this place behind. But as I reached the door, I stopped. What is it? She asked, her brow furrowing. Beautiful officer, I said, flashing her a devious grin. Can I get your WeChat? You know, in case I need to be interrogated again. Get out, she barked. Whatever respect she had for me vanished in an instant. I didn't stick around for the sequel. I bolted out of the station and onto the streets. The noise of Nan City hit me like a wave. Car horns, shouting vendors, the hum of millions of lives. I walked aimlessly for hours, feeling like a ghost in my own city. I had nowhere to go and nothing to do. Eventually, I found myself standing in front of a place called Club Zero. It was a high-end spot, packed even during the day with people looking to drown their stress. I found a quiet corner, lit a cigarette, and ordered a large beer. I took a long, heavy drag, blowing a thick cloud of smoke into the neon-lit air. I wasn't there for the girls or the music. I was there to forget. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. The moment Snow Wolf died. The guilt was a heavy, suffocating weight in my chest. So many lonely women are trying to catch your eye, a melodic voice said, breaking through my thoughts. Are you really going to ignore all of them? I looked up. A woman in a tight, elegant cheapao was walking toward me. She was stunning, the kind of beauty that felt effortless and dangerous at the same time. The dress hugged every curve of her body, making her look like a dream. I'm not here for excitement, I said, barely giving her a second glance. Now I'm curious, she said, sitting down across from me with a playful smile. What are you here for then? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world. Want to tell me about it? No, I said. I grabbed my beer and took a massive gulp. I tried to hide the sorrow in my eyes, but she was sharp. She saw it. She didn't push, though. She just sat there, smiling, watching the man with the scars drown his past in a glass of cheap lager. I could tell she was curious about me, but I didn't care. I was done with the beer. I stood up, pushed back my chair, and walked straight toward the bar to pay. I felt her eyes on my back. She was probably used to men falling over themselves to get her attention, but I didn't even give her a parting glance. Suddenly, a commotion broke out at the bar. I looked over and saw a young bartender glaring at me, his face twisted in anger. You've got some nerve, he spat, loud enough for the whole club to hear. Coming into Club Zero with no money? You looking for trouble? I felt a flush of embarrassment. I reached into my pocket again, but it was empty. My bank card was gone. My face must have turned green. I was stuck. Before the situation could escalate, the woman in the cheap house stepped in. Her expression was cold as she looked at the bartender. Sister Yen, the kid stuttered, bowing his head instantly. This guy has no money. He's trying to skip the bill. I watched her closely. The way people reacted to her told me everything. This woman wasn't just a regular. She owned the place. It's on the house, she said, waving him off. Then she turned to me, a playful smile returning to her lips. Interested in staying for a few more drinks now? Thanks, I said, keeping my voice flat. I owe you one, but I have things to do. I turned and walked out the door without looking back. Behind me, I heard the bartender whisper, Sister Yin, who was that guy? Don't ask questions you shouldn't, she snapped. Her voice turned icy. I want everything you can find on him. Give me his file. I stepped out into the crisp morning air. The sun was rising, but I felt lost. I was broke, my card was missing, and my stomach was starting to growl. I needed a plan. I walked past a tall office building and saw a recruitment sign posted at the entrance. I needed a way to survive in this city. If I was going to start over in Huaxia, I needed a job. I walked inside and found the interview room. A young woman in a sharp professional suit and crystal-rimmed glasses looked me up and down. She looked like a high-level secretary. No degree, she asked, frowning at my application. Do you have any relevant experience? No, I admitted. Then I'm sorry. Our company isn't the right fit for you. You can leave. Wait, I said, getting desperate. That's it. You don't want to know what I can do? I'm a hard worker. She laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. Hard work isn't enough. You don't have the experience. If you're that desperate, go find a construction site. Please, I pushed. I really need this. Look, I was in the military. I can do security. Just give me a shot. I said no. She snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. Are you here to cause trouble? Leave now, or I'll have the guards throw you out. I couldn't believe it. I was a professional, a man with my skill set, and I couldn't even get a job standing by a door. Just as I was about to give up, a middle-aged guard burst into the room, gasping for air. Secretary Ren, young Master Lin. He broke into the CEO's office. The woman, Ren Yijing, jumped out of her chair. What? Why didn't you stop him? We couldn't, the guard cried. He's too much for us. Useless, she hissed. She looked at the guard, then her eyes slowly drifted back to me. A strange, calculating smile spread across her face. You want to be a guard? My eyes lit up. Yes. Fine. But there's a test. Follow me. I followed her out, feeling a surge of excitement. I didn't notice the older guard looking at me with pity, like I was walking into a trap. As we walked through the lobby, I couldn't help but notice the rows of beautiful women in professional skirts and silk stockings. It was a hell of a view. So what's the test? I asked, tearing my eyes away to catch up with her. Simple, she said coldly. There's a man in the CEO's office. If you can kick him out, the job is yours. That's it. I grinned. Consider it done. Don't be so sure, she warned. That man has a lot of power behind him. I don't care who he is, I said, patting my chest. I won't disappoint you. We reached the top floor. It was quiet, reserved for the elites of the company. As we approached the CEO's door, a woman's scream echoed from inside. Get out. Get out right now. I looked through the doorway. A beautiful woman, Qin Mantong, was trembling with rage, pointing a finger at a young man sitting on her desk. Now, Mantong, don't be like that, the man said, adjusting his collar with a smug grin. Just agree to my terms, and the Han family won't touch your company. You're shameless, she hissed. The man was Lin Haoyu, the heir to the Lin Group. He was a known predator, using his family's wealth to bully anyone he wanted. He wanted her company, Xinting International, to fail so he could swoop in and play the hero. I'm only doing this because I love you, Lin Haoyu said smoothly. Become my girlfriend, and the Lin Group will protect you. It's a small price to pay for your empire, don't you think? Lin Haoyu leaned back, a predator's smirk playing on his lips. He told her that even the Han family would have to think twice before crossing him. I could tell exactly what he was thinking. His plan was perfect in his own mind. If Qin Mantong agreed, he'd get the girl and crush a rival family in one move. Qin Mantong's face turned ice cold. She pointed a trembling finger at the door. You're dreaming, she hissed. I'll never agree to this. Get out. Get out right now. Lin Haoyu didn't budge. He stood up from the sofa, his eyes scanning her with a disgusting, primal hunger. Leaving won't be that easy, Mantong, he said. What? What are you doing? Her voice wavered. She saw the predatory look in his eyes and panicked. What am I doing? Since you won't play nice, I'll just have to take what I want. I looked at Qin Mantong. She was the CEO of Xinting International, a legendary businesswoman. In 5 years, she had turned a small company into one of the top 3 groups in the city. She was only 23, a goddess in the eyes of every man in the business world. To a guy like Lin Haoyu, she was the only woman high status enough to match his title as the heir to the Lin Group. He started walking toward her with a wicked grin. Before she could move, he lunged forward and pulled her into a forced embrace. "Help! Someone help!" she screamed, struggling against him. But she was no match for his strength. Bam! I didn't wait another second. I kicked the office door open with enough force to rattle the walls. Rin Yijing and I stepped into the room. "Let her go," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "Then get out." Lin Haoyu instinctively released her. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "Who the hell are you? You're interfering with Lin Haoyu's business. Do you have a death wish?" As he spoke, 2 cold-faced bodyguards stepped up beside him, glaring at me with murderous intent. Rin Yijing rushed past me to Qin Montong's side. She pulled the terrified CEO away and looked her over anxiously. "President Qin, are you okay?" Qin Mantong took a moment to catch her breath, shaking her head slowly. Then, her fear turned into pure, white-hot rage. She looked at me and gritted her teeth. "Get him out of here. Do that, and the job is yours." My eyes lit up. This was the easiest interview of my life. I turned back to the glowering Lin Haoyu. "I'll say it one more time. Get out." "Kid, who gave you the courage to speak to me like that?" Lin Haoyu's face darkened. I didn't answer with words. I moved. 1 second I was standing there, the next I was a blur. My fist cut through the air like a lightning bolt. Thwack! Lin Haoyu stood there frozen, clutching his left eye. It puffed up instantly, turning a nasty shade of red. He looked dazed, like his brain had short-circuited. He couldn't believe someone had actually dared to hit him. "Young Master Lin, you're on." His bodyguards gasped. They were terrified. They hadn't even seen me move. That meant my speed was far beyond anything they could handle. "What are you waiting for?" Lin Haoyu screamed, snapping out of his shock. "Get him! Break his legs!" The 2 guards hesitated for a split second, then roared and lunged at me. Asterisk bang. Bang. Crash. Asterisk. It was over in a heartbeat. Both guards flew backward, smashing through a heavy work desk and shattering it into splinters. They hit the floor, foaming at the mouth, completely unconscious. Lin Haoyu's eyes went wide. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Behind me, Rin Yijing and Qin Mantong were rubbing their eyes, convinced they were hallucinating. How could one man be this good at fighting? Lin Haoyu's fear turned into desperate bravado. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "Do you even know who I?" Crack! The sound of snapping bone echoed through the silent office. Lin Haoyu let out a blood-curdling scream. I had grabbed his finger and snapped his wrist back. "Get out!" I stared him down, letting my killing intent leak out. He looked into my eyes and turned pale. He knew if he stayed another second, I'd break his other wrist too. "Fine. I'll remember this," he hissed, nursing his broken hand. He scrambled out of the room, leaving his unconscious guards behind. I walked over and casually kicked the 2 guards out into the hallway. Then, I turned back to the ladies with a smile. "So, how was my performance? Can I start today?" I took a good look at Qin Mantong. Up close, she was breathtaking. She looked like a goddess descended from the heavens, perfect in every way. But she had a cold, frosty aura that created an invisible pressure around her. The 2 women finally snapped out of their daze. "Yijing, who is he?" Qin Mantong asked blankly. Rin Yijing blushed slightly, the image of my fight still playing in her head. He's the bodyguard I just interviewed." "A bodyguard?" Qin Mantong's eyes widened. "President Qin, are you really okay?" Rin Yijing asked again, her voice full of worry. "I'm fine. Thank God you 2 came when you did." Qin Mantong took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "Yijing, I need to be alone for a minute. You 2 can go." "Of course. Rest well, President." Rin Yijing nodded, then looked at me. "Follow me. I'll take you to sign the paperwork." I was thrilled. I followed her out immediately. As we walked toward the HR department, I noticed something amazing. There were almost no men in the building. About 80% of the employees were women. I felt like I had just walked into a man's paradise. Everywhere I looked, there were beautiful professionals in high heels and pencil skirts. After I signed the contract, I realized I'd forgotten one very important detail. Hey, does the company provide meals? Ren Yijing's lip twitched. The cafeteria is on the 15th floor. The cost will be deducted from your monthly salary. Works for me. I laughed. I wasn't just here for the money. I was here to make sure I didn't starve. If there's anything else you're confused about, read the contract, she said, leading me back toward the hallway. It's all in there. I'll take you to the dorms now, Ren Yijing said, her pace quick and professional. Report to the security department tomorrow morning at 8 sharp. Don't be late. I hesitated, my stomach giving a traitorous growl. Can I hit the cafeteria first? She stopped dead in her tracks and looked back at me. As soon as our eyes met, my stomach roared again, loud enough to echo in the hallway. Ren Yijing's expression softened with a hint of understanding. Fine, she nodded. Go ahead and eat. As for your dorm, I can find it myself. I interrupted, not wanting to trouble her further. Don't worry about it. Suit yourself. She handed me a meal card and disappeared into the elevator. The cafeteria was nearly empty since it wasn't peak hours. I swiped the card, piled my tray high with food, and ate until I was finally satisfied. With my hunger sorted, it was time to find my new home. I followed the signs to the employee housing area and located my room number. When I pushed the door open, I froze. The room was cramped, dominated by 4 bunk beds that took up almost every inch of space. 5 young men in security uniforms were sitting around. They all stopped talking and stared at me. New guy, the leader asked, his voice cold. He was a thick, muscular man who looked like he spent all his free time in the gym. Yeah, just started today, I said with a friendly nod. Where's my bed? The 5 of them stood up in unison. The muscular leader stepped forward, his eyes locking onto mine with an icy glare. You're the one who took down young Master Lin's personal bodyguard, aren't you? If that's true, you must have some skill. I get by, I said modestly. A cruel smirk played on his lips. If you can last 3 rounds against me, you can stay. If not, get lost. And don't say we didn't warn you. Captain Qianwu is the best fighter in the entire security team. If you don't want a beating, leave now. I blinked, genuinely confused. Does that mean you guys can only last 3 rounds against him? The other 4 guards looked at each other, faces flushed with embarrassment. Cut the crap, one shouted. Are you in or are you out? If you're scared, beat it. I rubbed my nose and let out a short, arrogant laugh. Honestly, I'm not bragging, but even if all of you came at me at once, you wouldn't stand a chance. 3 rounds? That's a joke. Qian Wu's face darkened. He stepped toward me, but one of the guards grabbed his arm and whispered in his ear. Captain, young Master Lin wants us to teach him a real lesson. His orders were to break both of his hands. Qian Wu nodded, his gaze turning murderous. I caught the exchange and smiled to myself. So these guys were Lin Haoyu's plants inside Xinting International. They weren't just guards, they were thugs sent to cripple me. I won't bully you, Qian Wu said, trying to sound honorable. If you want to work here, it's one-on-one. You brave enough. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. I crooked my finger at the whole group. No need for that. All of you, come at me together. They stared at me like I was a total idiot. You're really asking for it, Qian Wu growled. He turned to his men. What are you waiting for? Give him something to remember. Nobody acts this cocky in front of me without paying the price. The 4 guards moved in, circling me. The one in front reached out to grab my shoulder, a sneer on his face. Today, you learn what happens when you cross young Master Lin. So you really are his dogs, I muttered. Then I moved. I jerked my shoulder, shedding his grip like a snake shedding skin. My fists blurred through the air, 4 lightning-fast strikes. Asterisk thud. 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 Asterisk all 4 guards went flying. They crashed into the bunk beds and the walls, groaning in a chorus of pain. It took less than 3 seconds. Qian Wu stood alone, his jaw dropping as he looked at his fallen comrades. His expression shifted from arrogance to deadly serious. I see. I thought the rumors about you beating Lin's man were exaggerated. Guess you've got some moves. Now it's one-on-one, I said, beckoning him forward. Come on. Fine. You asked for this. Qian Wu lunged. He didn't use anything fancy, just standard military boxing, but his execution was flawless. His fist whistled toward my face like a bullet. Not bad, I thought. I stepped into a Tai Chi stance, swaying my body just enough to let the punch graze the air where my head had been. He was surprised I avoided it, but he didn't stop. His style shifted, becoming more intricate. I felt a surge of inner energy, chi, emanating from his fists. He had actually mastered military boxing to the point of integrating internal power. I retreated out of the room and into the hallway, staying just out of reach. "Are you just going to keep hiding?" he roared, frustrated. "You're the first person I've seen take military boxing to this level," I said calmly. "But it's still just a basic technique. It'll never reach the level of true martial arts." "You talk too much." Qianwu leaped forward, throwing a high side kick aimed straight at my temple. It was fast, powerful, and aimed to kill. I waited until the very last millisecond. My right hand shot out, catching his ankle mid-air with effortless precision. "How?" Qianwu gasped. He had put all his internal strength into that kick, yet I had stopped it like I was catching a falling leaf. Before he could react, I surged my own chi into his leg. His face went pale instantly. He felt a wave of crushing exhaustion wash over him, his muscles turning to lead. He stared at me, his eyes wide with terror as he realized he was completely at my mercy. "Your foundation is solid," I said. Just as Qianwu was about to black out, I released his ankle. He stumbled, swaying on his feet for a few seconds before finally steadying himself. I watched him closely, a faint smile on my lips. "There's something strange about you," I continued. "Your Dai meridian is blocked by a surge of stagnant qi. If I'm not mistaken, you're suffering from a severe internal injury." Qianwu's eyes widened. He looked at me as if I were a ghost. How do you know that?" He was stunned. He hadn't told anyone. Years ago, that very injury had forced him to leave the military in disgrace. It was his darkest secret. "I don't just know about it," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I can heal it." Qianwu's entire body began to tremble. "What did you say?" He looked at me with a sudden, desperate flicker of hope. He looked like a man drowning who had just been offered a lifeline. While this was happening downstairs, the atmosphere in the CEO's office was suffocating. Qin Mantong stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the city skyline. She was still shaken from the encounter with Lin Haoyu. For 5 years, she had poured her soul into Xinting International. She had built it from a small firm into a powerhouse. Now, she was ready to break into the real estate market. But there was a problem. The Han family controlled 70% of the industry in the city. To move forward meant declaring war on them. The Han family was dangerous. They operated in both the light and the shadows. Between them and the Lin family's interference, Qin Mantong felt like she was being squeezed from all sides. The door opened, and Ren Yijing walked in. "President Qin, are you all right?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I'm fine, Yijing," Qin Mantong replied, though her forced smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just wondering if this move into real estate is a mistake. If we fail, the whole company could go bankrupt." "I know what you're worried about," Ren Yijing said. "Financially, we're ready. But the Han family, I'm afraid they'll play dirty. They might target you personally." Qin Mantong didn't say a word. She knew the Han family's reputation. They weren't just business rivals, they were ruthless. "Your safety is the priority now," Ren Yijing said firmly. "After today, I think you need a personal bodyguard. Someone to protect you 24 hours a day." "A personal bodyguard?" Qin Mantong blinked in surprise. Ren Yijing nodded. "The Han family has many ways to stop us, and hurting you is the easiest one. You're the face of this company. You need protection." Qin Mantong thought about Lin Haoyu's arrogance earlier that day. A chill ran down her spine. "You're right. I do need someone. Should we pull someone from the security department?" "That's a good idea," Ren Yijing agreed. "There's a man named Qianwu. I checked his files. He's ex-special forces. He's highly capable." Suddenly, a frantic knocking interrupted them. A young security guard burst in, drenched in sweat and gasping for air. "Secretary Ren, it's bad. The new guy you hired. He's in a fight." Ren Yijing froze. She immediately thought of me. "Who is he fighting?" "He's fighting Captain Qianwu. You have to come quickly." Ren Yijing's face went pale. She knew how terrifying Qianwu was. He was the strongest man in the entire security team. In her mind, I was already a dead man. "Take me there," she snapped. "I'll go with you," Qin Mantong added, following them to the elevator. I want to see this Qian Wu for myself. Back in the hallway, Qian Wu was still staring at me. The hope in his eyes was almost painful to see. Can you really heal me? He stammered. His injury was his greatest regret. It was the reason his life had stalled. Hearing that I had a cure made him forget everything else. It's a bit complicated, but it's doable, I said. I looked at him and realized he had potential. With the right training, he could be a formidable asset. The only problem was that he was currently working for Lin Haoyu. Suddenly, thud, Qian Wu dropped to both knees. He slammed his forehead against the floor. What are you doing? I asked, genuinely caught off guard. Please, he choked out, hitting the floor again. If you heal me, I'll do anything. Anything you ask. At that exact moment, the elevator doors hissed open. Ren Yijing and Qin Mantong stepped out and stopped dead in their tracks. They expected to see a bloody brawl. Instead, they saw the toughest man in the company kneeling and kowtowing to the new recruit. The president is here, someone whispered in the hallway. The crowd of curious employees quickly scattered, though a few lingered around the corners to peek. Zhang Yi, what is going on here? Ren Yijing shouted, marching toward us. She looked down at the man on the floor. And you, what's your name? I'm Qian Wu, he said, his voice small and trembling. Ren Yijing was speechless. This was the man she had just recommended as an elite bodyguard. Seeing him groveling on the floor felt like a slap in the face. Qin Mantong stood behind her, watching me with a quiet, intense curiosity. She didn't say a word, but I could tell she was reassessing everything she thought she knew about me. We were just practicing, I said, flashing them a polite, innocent smile. I had to play it cool. If I got fired for fighting on my first day, I'd be broke. I actually needed this job. But looking at Ren Yijing's face, I could tell she wasn't buying it. She looked absolutely furious. Ren Yijing didn't care about my smile. She ignored me entirely, her eyes blazing with fury as she glared at the men on the floor. This is a place of business, she snapped. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. If word of this gets out, Xinting International will be a laughingstock. I kept my mouth shut. When Ren Yijing was this angry, staying quiet was the only survival strategy. Yijing, that's enough. Qin Mantong stepped forward. Her face was like a mask of ice, cold and unreadable. She didn't look at the groveling guards. Her gaze drifted toward me, lingering for a second before she turned toward the exit of the dorm area. You, she said, her voice flat. Follow me. Two gasps rang out at the same time. Ren Yijing stared at the president in pure shock. I was just as stunned. I stood there like an idiot, my mind racing. This is it, I thought. I'm getting fired on day one. I'd barely stepped foot in the building, and I was already heading for the abyss. What are you waiting for? Qin Mantong paused and looked back, her brow furrowing. Follow me. I snapped out of it and hurried after her, my heart sinking with every step. I was definitely getting the boot. You're pathetic, Ren Yijing hissed at Qian Wu as she passed him. She didn't explain what she meant, but she didn't wait for an answer either. She hurried to catch up with us. We reached the president's office. Qin Mantong sat behind her massive executive desk and stared at me. She didn't say a word. She just watched me with those piercing eyes while I stood there, feeling like a criminal on trial. Ren Yijing sat on the side sofa, looking back and forth between us. She clearly had no idea why I was here either. What is your name? Qin Mantong finally broke the silence. Zhang Yi, President Qin, I replied. About the fighting. Ren Yijing started, clearly trying to find a way to plead my case. But Qin Mantong cut her off. The words that came out of her mouth next left both of us speechless. Are you interested in being my personal bodyguard? The room went silent. Qin Mantong was back to her usual freezing self, her eyes scanning me like I was a piece of equipment she was evaluating. What? Ren Yijing practically jumped off the sofa. You want him to be your personal bodyguard? I didn't answer right away. I was torn. What are you doing? This is a massive opportunity. Ren Yijing urged me. She had seen Qian Wu, the toughest guy we had, kneeling and begging for mercy. She knew my skills were far beyond anyone else in the building. She wasn't about to let a talent like me just sit in a guard booth. I looked at Qin Mantong. I had come here to disappear, to live a quiet life as a nobody. I used to be the god of assassins. A bodyguard is an assassin's natural enemy. How could I become the very thing I used to hunt? What if I refuse? I asked quietly. Rin Yijing looked like she wanted to strangle me. Are you stupid? You want to be a nameless security guard your whole life? This is a chance of a lifetime. I just smiled and stayed silent. They didn't understand. I wanted peace, not a promotion. Don't be so quick to say no, Qin Mantong said, leaning forward. The salary is much higher than a guard's. It's a noble profession. Think about it. She wasn't stupid. She had seen me take down Lin Haoyu's thugs in a heartbeat. She knew Qian Wu, a former Special Forces soldier, was no match for me. She wasn't going to let a valuable asset like me walk away. I thought about my empty pockets. How much does it pay? How much do you want? She countered. I thought about my old life. Back then, I wouldn't even get out of bed for less than 8 figures. 10 million, I said with a grin. How's that sound? 10 million. Qin Mantong bolted upright in her chair. Rin Yijing looked at me like I was a ghost. Is that too high? I asked. Why don't you just go rob a bank? Qin Mantong glared at me. 10 million? Do you know how many bodyguards I could hire for that? I felt a bit awkward. To me, 10 million was a discount. That was my minimum starting price for any job back in the day. But I realized I wasn't in that world anymore. I was broke and I needed to eat. I can give you 100,000 a month, Qin Mantong said, rubbing her temples. I had clearly given her a headache. If you don't want it, go back to the security gate. I thought about it for a long time. 100,000 wasn't much for a guy like me, but it was enough to live on. Fine, I said, nodding. I'll do it. But I have one condition. Speak, she said. I need a 50,000 yuan advance. It's an emergency. Qin Mantong let out a sigh of relief. At least it wasn't another crazy demand. She knew she needed someone like me. If Qian Wu was the best they had, and I had broken him, then I was the only logical choice. Give me your bank card number, she said, reaching for the phone. I'll have finance wire it now. About that, I scratched my head. I lost my card. I have to go to the bank tomorrow to get a new one. The truth was, I was just a victim of circumstance. A guard's salary wouldn't let me live the way I wanted. 100,000 a month? I could make that work. Fine, Qin Mantong said, her eyes locking onto mine. Now that you're my bodyguard, there are rules. You are on call 24 hours a day. You follow my orders without question. No problem, I said. She looked me up and down with a hint of disgust. And you need to look the part. Those clothes have to go. You need to dress formally. I looked down at my worn-out gear and laughed. You're the boss. Whatever you say. Only thing is. Now what? I don't have money for new clothes. She rolled her eyes. Don't worry about that. Give me your sizes and I'll have 2 suits ordered for you. Perfect, I said, grinning. Qin Mantong looked like she was already regretting her decision, but she had no other choice. She turned to Rin Yijing. Yijing, go back to the security department and pick out a few more men for the general team. Rin Yijing nodded and left, giving me one last curious glance as she walked out. You can go too, Qin Mantong said, waving me away. Leave your phone number. I wrote down my number and headed out. I needed that money, and I needed it fast. There was a bank right near the Xinting building, so I headed there on foot. When I walked inside, my heart sank. The place was packed. Long lines stretched across the lobby, and it looked like I'd be waiting for hours. It looked like getting a new bank card was going to take a long time. I sighed, resigning myself to the wait, and joined the back of the line. I just wanted to get this over with. Suddenly, a deafening gunshot echoed through the lobby. The orderly line shattered instantly. People screamed in terror. Panic surged through the room as the high-pitched wail of the bank's alarm kicked in. Don't move. Nobody fucking move, a voice roared. 5 masked men stormed through the entrance, clutching firearms. The leader was a massive guy, at least 6'3" and built like a tank. He waved his gun at the crowd, his eyes wild behind his mask. I squinted, calmly scanning the 5 of them. My name is Zhang Yi, and honestly, all I could think was how unlucky I was. Of all the days to run into a bank robbery, it had to be today. The room went deathly silent. Everyone froze. One woman nearby clamped her hand over her own mouth and then over her child's, desperate to stifle even the slightest sob. The leader seemed pleased with the silence. He stepped forward, his black gun barrel pointing toward the center of the crowd. Hands behind your heads. Everyone on the ground now, he bellowed. Anyone tries to be a hero, I'll take your life first. Nobody argued. Everyone dropped to the floor, hands locked behind their heads. I followed suit, crouching down low. Right next to me, a young woman was trembling violently. Her face was pale with terror, and her small hands were deathly white from gripping a bulging bag against her chest. She curled her body inward, trying to disappear into the floor. That bag clearly meant everything to her. While 2 robbers kept their guns trained on us, the other 3 moved with practiced efficiency. They neutralized the security guards and forced the bank staff to start dumping stacks of cash into large burlap sacks. "Relax," the leader said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening crawl. "We have a code. As long as you don't play games, you keep your lives. But if someone doesn't listen, well, bullets don't have eyes." "Boss, the bag is full," one of the robbers shouted, running back from the counter. He was breathing hard, looking frantic. "What?" The leader blinked, then snapped. "Are you an idiot? If it's full, stop packing. The cops will be here any second. This is enough for us to live like kings for a while. Let's go?" I watched them, unimpressed by their conversation. Despite their frantic words, their movements were professional. These weren't amateurs. I could smell a faint scent of blood clinging to them, the kind of smell that only comes from men who have killed before. A few minutes later, the robbers were ready. They had the money and were heading for the door. The girl next to me let out a tiny breath of relief, her grip on her bag loosening just a fraction. Then, the world outside exploded into sound. Siren after siren wailed, closing in on the building. "This is the police. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands up, or we will use force," a megaphone blared from the street. The robbers froze. The leader cursed under his breath, his eyes darting toward the windows. "Damn it! How did they get here so fast?" "Boss, what do we do?" one of the younger guys asked, his voice shaking. "We're trapped." "Shut up," the leader snapped, his composure returning. "Trapped? Look around you. We have a room full of shields. Grab one. I want to see if those cops have the balls to rush us then." The robbers' eyes lit up. They turned toward the crowd of people huddled on the floor. I felt the collective heartbeat of the room skip. Everyone started praying, silently begging the universe, "Not me. Please, not me." A short, wiry robber scanned the crowd. His eyes landed on the spot right next to me. He smirked. The girl beside me saw him looking. Her face went ashen, and her whole body began to shake. The short robber walked straight over and grabbed her by the arm, hauling her up. She let out a piercing scream of pure terror. "Shut up," the robber hissed, jamming the muzzle of his gun against her forehead. "One more sound, and I'll blow your brains out right here." The girl, whose name was Yushi, went silent instantly. She stood there, legs wobbling so hard she could barely stay upright. She had come here to withdraw money for her mother, who was critically ill in the hospital. Now, she was a human shield. She clutched her bag even tighter, terrified they would see what was inside. That money was her mother's life. The short robber didn't just want a hostage. I saw the way he looked at her. There was a disgusting, primal hunger in his eyes. Then, his gaze shifted to the bag she was protecting. "What's in the bag?" he growled. "Open it." Yushi shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. Please just let me go. "Give it here, bitch." He lunged for it. She wouldn't let go. She sobbed, her voice breaking. "Please, this is for my mother. It's her life-saving money. I don't care if it's for the Pope. If it's cash, it's mine." He yanked the bag with all his strength. In a moment of pure, desperate heat, Yushi leaned forward and bit down hard on the robber's wrist. "Ack, you bitch. You bit me." The robber went red with rage. He ripped the bag from her hands with one hand and swung the heavy butt of his pistol with the other. It slammed into her forehead with a sickening thud. Yushi collapsed to the ground, a massive bruise already forming on her head. She looked completely broken, wailing hysterically. "No. Please, it's my mother's money. Give it back." I watched the whole thing from the floor. My blood turned to ice. A cold, murderous intent flooded my vision, sharper than any blade. This man deserved to die. To steal a daughter's last hope for her dying mother? That was a line no one should cross. Outside, the bank was a fortress of blue and red lights. Snipers were already in position on the surrounding rooftops. Just then, a police car roared around the corner, tires screaming as it performed a perfect drift and slammed to a halt in front of the entrance. A middle-aged police officer with a dignified, stern face stepped out of the lead car. He scanned the scene, his brow furrowed deep with worry. This was Luo Kaiping, the chief of the city police bureau. A sharp, capable-looking female officer rushed up to meet him. "Uncle Luo, you're here," she said, her voice tight. This was Chu Xiangxiang. "Xiangxiang, what's the situation inside?" Luo Kaiping asked, his expression heavy. "Based on our intel, there are 5 armed robbers," she explained. "They've taken everyone inside hostage. We don't dare to force our way in yet." "Are the snipers in position?" Chu Xiangxiang nodded. "They're on standby. The moment a robber shows their face, they'll take the shot. For now, we need to stabilize their emotions and ensure the safety of the civilians. We only breach as a last resort." "Understood," Luo Kaiping said. He grabbed a megaphone from a nearby officer and turned toward the bank. "Inside the bank, listen up. You are surrounded. There is no escape. Drop your weapons and surrender now, or we will take this building by force." Inside, the leader's face twisted. He was losing his patience. "Number 4, what are you waiting for? Grab the hostage and let's blast our way out of here." "Coming, boss," the short robber shouted back. He peeked into the bag he'd just stolen, and his eyes lit up. It was stuffed with cash, at least 100,000 yuan. "Get up, you bitch." He reached down and violently hauled Li Yushi off the floor. She was still sobbing hysterically, her eyes vacant. Her mother's life-saving money was gone. She looked like a hollow shell, a walking corpse with no soul left. "Humph, I've got a hostage," the leader sneered. "Why should I fear the cops? Follow me." He dragged Li Yushi in front of him, pressing the cold, black muzzle of his pistol against her forehead. They started toward the exit. "Wait." A voice, cold as a winter grave, echoed from behind them. It carried a killing intent so sharp it made the leader's skin crawl. He froze in his tracks and spun around. I stood up slowly from the crowd. I walked forward until I was only 10 meters away from them. "Kid, you want to die?" One of the other robbers barked, leveling his gun at my chest. The leader narrowed his eyes, studying me. He'd spent years living on the edge of a blade, and he could feel the overwhelming aura radiating off me. He knew instantly that I wasn't some ordinary bystander. The other hostages stared at me in shock. They all had the same thought. Is this guy suicidal? "Kid, don't meddle in things that don't concern you," the leader warned. I didn't want to meddle, I said, my gaze shifting to the broken, soulless Li Yushi. But your man crossed a line. He took money meant to save a life. The leader's face reddened with rage. He raised his gun, his finger tightening on the trigger. He was fast, but I was faster. Before he could blink, his wrist erupted in pain. His gun clattered to the floor. "What the? You brat." The other 4 robbers didn't see me move, but they saw the silver needle embedded in their leader's wrist. They immediately swung their muzzles toward me. A bunch of ants think they can threaten me with toys? A cold smirk played on my lips. Then I moved. To the people in the bank, I was nothing but a blur. A second later, the 4 robbers were airborne, flying backward like kites with their strings cut. They slammed into the ground, their bodies twitching for a moment before they went completely limp. It happened so fast that no one could even process how I'd taken them down. My strikes were precise, heavy, and final. The silence that followed was deafening.